pile them all up as big as we can and offer to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. Thinking like that. It's very auspicious. Okay.
Okay, so we can chant together. Saji Pöki Jokshin Metok Tramri Rablinji Nidegen Padi Sangye Jindu Mikte Ulwa Yidrokunamdag Jingla Parshok. Perfect, pure, holy gurus from the billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dharmakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. Ida Guru Ratna Mandalaka Nivyatayami.
All right. Thank you. So now our little prayer, setting us off in the right direction, reminding ourselves of our refuge and our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. If we feel we're all Buddhists already, not otherwise, don't. And then our aspiration, this marvelous long-term aspiration, the motive, the reason, the basis of our being here together to listen to these teachings is so that we can become a Buddha, so we can be a benefit to every sentient being. I mean, as long-term as that is, and as abstract as that sounds to us, it sounds like such a nutty idea. But, remember that Buddha is saying this is the potential of every one of us. So we might as well have it in the mind. Aim for it. Think big. Think long-term. Why not? Sangye charang tsoke tognam la, jangcho badu dagni kyab suchi, dagi chernyen gipe sonam ki, drola penche sangye drupa shok. Sangye charang tsoke tognam la, jangcho badu dagni kyab suchi, dagi chernyen gipe sonam ki, drola penche sangye drupa shok. So we're saying that until we are enlightened, we will rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And by the virtuous karma, by the positive seeds we plant in our mind from listening to these teachings, may we become a Buddha, to be a benefit to every single suffering sentient being. That's the plan. Okay. Let's go. So, hang on a second, sorry. Just have to stop for a second. And okay, so far we've up to we kind of completed to some degree, but we can do more. No, we've got more to do, but we've looked into the lower scope, as Lama Tsongkhapa puts it, this packaging of the Lam Rim, this packaging of this complete path to Buddhahood. We've discussed, the lowest the teachings and practices of the lowest capability, the disciple of the lowest capability. So I always like to call it junior school. That's what we call it in Australia anyway. So it helps you. It's just something, it's colloquial, but it's very direct. Junior school, we get it, comes first. So of course, as we gradually go along this path, we're going to understand why it comes first. You've got to understand why does it come first. You've got to understand why compassion is more advanced. We don't get this. And when we hear it, we kind of get a bit puzzled. But as we progress through, you're going to see it, and you've got to understand this psychologically. That's the great benefit of this way of packaging the teachings of Tsongkhapa, which is based on Atisha's text in the 11th century. That's the reason, because otherwise we really have no sense of a plan. We have no sense of what to study first, what to realize first. And this really does take us time. I mean, I remember since listening to the teachings from Lama Zopa, all these Lam Rim teachings, and then I became a nun, and then I was working for Wisdom Publications, and I was doing my practice every day, and I was editing Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. It was back in like more than 40 years ago. Still, I didn't quite get it intellectually, the psychological structure of this presentation. So that's what I'm trying to stress, to get us to see that clearly. So I don't mean to state that before we go what we've discussed. Why does living in vows, working on your body and speech, controlling your body and speech come first? Why not start to meditate first? Why not develop compassion first, for that matter? Well, when we understand it, it's so logical. So the Buddha's big deal, and this is not implied from the very beginning, you've got to get this afterwards, but the Buddha's deal is that our mind is driven. Why we suffer, this is the whole point of the entire path, why we suffer is because our mind is full of layers and layers and layers and layers of emotional afflictions, as they call them, disturbing emotions, delusions. We're going to get into this next. That's Buddha's fundamental point. And again, if we hear the word Buddha, the end result of this entire course to enlightenment, you're going to graduate as a Buddha. And the etymology of that word, is really good to keep it in mind. I'm sure I've mentioned it several times. Buddha implies, and the Tibetan equivalent, sangye, the first syllable, sang, bud, implies the total eradication from one's mind of all ego, all fears, all delusion, all depression, anxiety, anger, and all the other thousands of unhappy emotions that we are intimately familiar with, and which we think in our neuroscientific world, in our modern psychological world, we assume are normal parts of a normal person. In fact, if we hear that Buddha's saying we can get rid of all this unhappiness, it sounds like ridiculous, because we assume a normal person has all these things. In other words, we think they're so normal, meaning that if you didn't have them, you'd be wacko, you'd be weird. This is how primordially deep these delusions are, and how outrageous, how radical, I would suggest, that Buddha's view is. Okay, he's saying this. So again, where did he get this information from? From his own experience, please. He's not a creator. It wasn't revealed to him. It doesn't come from on high. He's not speculating. He didn't have a vision. He's not making it up. None of this. It's his own experience. He's telling you what he has done himself. So then, first point, not just that, he says, if you're on the Mahayana path, you can not only get rid of all the rubbish, which brings you liberation from samsara, wow, you can also develop you will, when you are a Buddha, your virtue states of mind, your positive states of mind, your productive states of mind, your valid states of mind, your kindness and love and intelligence and compassion. And we are also intimately familiar with those. He says they are at the core of our being, and these will be developed to perfection. Now, this is pretty demented psychologically. I'm sorry. Check it out. If you're a therapist yourself, you're going to squeeze your brain trying to work this out. Where's this coming from? And that's why we think, oh, it's religion, it's different. No. Buddha's a brilliant psychologist, and I'm not joking. Buddha's expertise is the mind. So why then aren't we going into the job straight away? Why? How come we're looking at weird things like don't kill, don't steal, don't lie? Why is Buddha telling us about that? Why is he telling us about this law of karma? Where does that fit in? Well, guess what? We have a mind, but we also have a body and we have speech, do we not? Now check the world. Look at the world. Forget yourself. Look at the world and look at what people, forget animals as well, look at what people do to others in terms of harm. You see people kill, drop bombs, rape, torture, steal, lie. We know this. It's pretty obvious. We've got to analyze where do those actions come from? What compels a person to use their body to rape? What compels a person to use their speech to abuse? Well, it's pretty obvious. The mind does. And which part of your mind? The delusions, the attachment, the anger, the arrogance, you name it. So the mind is the boss. Your mind is the boss. But guess what? As Lama Tsongkhapa calls, we've got to control the slaves of the mind. I like to call them the servants of the mind. What's the difference? That's your body and speech. So think about this. If you're so uncontrolled with your mouth that as soon as you're angry, you vomit out whatever you feel, it's all very fine to say your anger is the main cause, but if you can't control the servants of your anger, you're in serious trouble. It's not possible to control your mind. I mean, when I was a little girl, anger was one of my main qualities. I know I was pretty quick on the, pretty quick with it. I didn't have to sit there and think, will I be angry? Won't I be angry? No, it just came out my mouth. Why? Because I was programmed with the habit to express my anger, in my case, with my speech. I didn't kill or rape too many people. So it's sort of logical, given that your mind is the boss, given that these delusions must be pretty strong, then we need to understand the logic of why they are there and why, and therefore how to control the servants of the speech, the servants of the mind. That's junior school. That's the lower scope. That's the minimum level. So it's got more to it than that. But that's the experiential, immediate way to comprehend psychologically why controlling your body and speech comes first, why living in vows of ethics comes first, why understanding the view of karma has to come first. There's more to it than merely just moment by moment. You can see it. So what karma is Buddha's presentation of how come you come into this life in the first place with the habit to be angry, the habit to play piano, the habit to play football, the habit to be loving. It's Buddha's bigger. It comes from this view of karma is extensive and vast, and it's dealt with in great depth when you study it in the Tibetan monastic university system and in the past as well. But here our teacher gets the essential experiential component from that vast body of knowledge. And the very first level of practice, Buddha, this is the first junior school level, he, without too much explanation, he exhorts us to back off and do not kill, please, and do not steal, and do not use your body to harm others based on, because why? Because these are based on delusions. You don't kill out of compassion and love, generally speaking. You don't rape out of kindness to somebody. You don't steal out of generous wish to help others. So it's true, it's obvious that they're driven by the delusions. But Buddha, at this first level of practice in the Lam Rim, he just simply, he's giving us sort of good instructions. Like if you go, I always like it in the health food stores where you have your homeopathic medicine. I'm not surprised it was invented by Germans. They're very organized. Because you go to your homeopathic section and you've got the list of diseases from A to Z, and then you have your list of your medicines from A to Z. It's so practical. You look up arthritis, arnica, thank you very much, goodbye. That's obviously German. They're very good. I'm not being sarcastic. I love it. I was going to tell a joke there about Munich people, but you're not Munich people, are you? You're Zurich people, so it's different. But you're a bit similar. Anyway, never mind. So then Buddha doesn't go on about it.
But we are from all over the world.
Oh, yeah, which is true. Any Germans, I don't want to be rude to the Germans. Caroline, you sound like a German. No, you're not, are you? Okay, never mind. I won't tell my joke, don't worry. I've told it before anyway. No, I'll tell it to you. I was in Munich for about a year, and I love Munich. I love Zurich. I love all these lovely, pretty cities, these old cities with nice, pretty colored buildings and tram tracks, because we have trams in Melbourne, you see. And it's very efficient and clean and kind of things work. I love this. I just love it. So I spent a year this is in the late 80s. I spent a year at the center in Munich in Aryatara Institute. And I was really impressed I told you this, I'm sure. I was really impressed by the bus system. The buses were immaculate, clean, and they came on time, they left on time. Everything was no, like in London, you have 4 buses all come at once, and then you have no buses for an hour. I remember when I first arrived in London in the late 60s, there's sort of like 50 people in a long line. I'd never seen lines before, queues before. It was very shocking to me. So anyway, the Munich buses were amazing. And I praised the system to this Munich lady. And I said how on time they are, how efficient. And she looked shocked. She said, they are not. She said, they're at least 2 minutes early or 2 minutes late. I thought that was very good, very efficient. It's very truthful, very accurate. I loved it. So anyway, where were we? Buddha. Okay, Buddha and his path, a teacher's interpretation of it. So the agenda that a teacher's got at this first presentation. So obviously we've got the earlier teachings, which I'll go through in a minute, that led us to karma. Karma is the culmination of junior school. It's at the beginning, at the karma, that he by thinking about beginning this mind, by thinking about getting a teacher, by thinking about perfect human rebirth, by thinking about impermanence, that I could die at any minute, by thinking about the possibility of future suffering, then whom can I turn to? The Buddha. Now I begin to put my money where my mouth is. Now I begin to practice. Buddha's Atisha and Tsongkhapa are priming our minds, getting us ready to actually want to practice. That's his agenda. So then the first level of practice, don't worry about your mind yet, please. Don't worry about all the fancy things. Don't worry about emptiness yet. Forget about compassion yet. Good Lord. You just got to start controlling your body and speech, please. Now, the point is why? Why? This is the point. Why? Because Buddha's deal is, like we've talked, mind is beginningless, mind is not physical, mind is not the handiwork of mummy or daddy or creator, shockingly enough. Mind is not a function of the brain, shocking enough. But as I've pointed out, more and more modern neuroscientific people now discussing with the Dalai Lama, listening to the Tibetan approaches, are now questioning their own assumptions, which is marvelous. And your mind is yours. Your mind is yours. The bottom line is your mind is yours. And you bring your tendencies with you from having practiced them before. So this is the next detail about karma, given that everything I think and do and say necessarily programs me. This is the whole point that Buddha's making. He doesn't say it like this back in India. They don't talk this way. I'm trying to say it in modern language so we can hear it properly. Everything we think and do and say programs us. There's not a millisecond of what we think and do and say that goes astray. Everything leaves seeds in our mind. That's the analogy he uses all the time. And what will those, and seeds being seeds, will ripen as fruits. When? Well, guess what? Seeds ripen in the future. So the next level of detail, he has found from his own experience that everything that's labeled a negative action, speaking simply, when you get into more details where it's very nuanced, there's lots of details and we need to look into clearly, but the simple instruction here, every millisecond of what you think and do and say that's driven by attachment, anger, jealousy, low self-esteem, blah, 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 will necessarily leave a negative imprint in your mind. Why? Because that delusion drives it. We'll go to this again. We discussed this last week. The key factor, okay, not finished. The next piece of detail, and every action we think and do it, every action we do and say and think with our body, speech, and mind, that's labeled positive or virtuous, which is an action driven by a virtuous state of mind, programs you with those activities. So in other words, every time you're being kind, it's so uncomplicated. You keep programming yourself with kindness. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? And every time you're unkind or mean or depressed or jealous, and don't feel guilty, we're all like this, then you're programming yourself with that ridiculous habit. It's sort of obvious, but we don't think about that way in our culture. It's very, very fascinating how we don't think of it like that. It's very extraordinary how we don't think of it like that. We know if you practice piano really well, you'll become a good musician. We know if you practice killing very well, you become a good killer. If you're like a sniper, as long as it's called a sniper, then you've got a profession. So we know the more you do it, the better you'll become at it. The more you make cakes, the better you'll become. But as soon as we hear that the more I practice anger, the more angry I'll become, we don't like that. We do not like that one, but we've got to blame someone else. That's the schizophrenic behavior of ego and dualism. Don't be insulted by me using that word. I mean, yes, you would often use it, So we take responsibility. So the karmic views take responsibility. If no one made me, if I'm not just some accident that got plonked on the earth by some unknown person, my parents didn't make me, it was just a random event, which is how we think sometimes, then no wonder we suffer. But no, Buddha says, it's a law. Karma is a natural law. It's a natural law, people. Natural laws aren't made by anybody. That's the whole point about when we think of natural law in the world. We think of natural law, then we think of God's law. And according to the fundamental way the Buddha sees the universe, there's no equivalent. It's not his law. He didn't make up karma. Good Lord. He saw it. He observed it. Like Einstein observed relativity. Like a good botanist observed the laws of botany. This is exactly the approach. So it's a law that so the bottom line is, if everything you think and do and say that's negative ripens as future suffering, before we go further, then you think, oh, that's interesting to know. Thank you very much. I don't want to suffer. Well, that's it. That's the essence of why Buddha says don't kill. But how we hear it, because we hear it as religion and God and going to get punished, then we get all neurotic, No, be accountable, grow up. That's the agenda here. You can study it all in more detail. You will if you study further. You go into it in much more detail, much more intricate. But it's the fundamentals and it's a simple instruction. Buddha says, well, based on, so his little first set of instructions, entry-level junior school, grade 1 practice immediate, have on the basis of thinking about beginningless minds, thinking about the need for a teacher, thinking about perfect human rebirth, thinking about impermanence, thinking about, lower realms, and then thinking about refuge. Just leads you, primes you, programs you to get to want to practice. And then gradually you start. So Buddha just simply gives us a little list of 7 things. There's 10. He gives us a list of the first 7. The first 4 are the 3 of the body. Don't kill. Why not, Buddha? In case we forget. Okay, why not Jesus? Ask Jesus why not. He will tell you, because God said not to, and that's nothing wrong, but that's not Buddha's deal. And that's how we think of religion. But that's the Christian, that's a creator religion view. Buddha's not a creator. So this is a huge, crucial piece to get very clear in our minds. I promise. Buddha's not the boss. He's the boss, but he's not our creator. And that's the massive difference. And when he says don't kill, you know, it's not the same as when Jesus says don't kill. Jesus says it because God said not to, because God's the boss. But for the Buddha, it's natural law. Guess what, folks? People don't like getting killed. It harms them. That's what defines the heaviest type of negative actions, an action that harms another. But this is the crucial point at this point in karma, this point in junior school. Buddha's not exhorting us not to kill because it harms another. That's based on compassion. That's too advanced. He says, no, it is an action that harms another, but the basis for his exhorting us not to kill is because guess what, honey child Robina? It'll produce future suffering for you. And that's the piece we've got to think about. But we forget this. We don't like to think of this. We think that sounds selfish. And if we don't get this, we can't get renunciation. And if we can't get renunciation, we can't have proper compassion. And you'll get to see this as we go. It's very clear, you know. The next one is don't misuse, I'm putting it into these words, don't misuse your body on the basis of sexual attachment, which is a very strong one. We can see that people rape. Well, that's on anger as well, isn't it? And, you know, cheating on your partner, that kind of thing. And the third one of the body is don't take the ungiven, as Lama Tsongkhapa calls it. I think that's the translation of stealing in Tibetan. It's very direct. Don't take the ungiven. Super clear. So in other words, this is your first level of practice. And again, remember, it's not because Buddha says, and you think, I'm being a good girl, I'll get rewarded. That's the view of a creator. That's not the Buddha's view. You just, it's sort of like you go, it's exactly the same analogy. You go to your doctor and she sees you're not in good health. And she understands nutrition. And so she says, I'm going to give you a few instructions, Robina. Don't eat sugar, don't smoke cigarettes, don't do this, and don't do this. She says, don't. She gives you a series of don'ts. And she says, start now, baby. This is incredible. It's so logical. It's so logical. She's not going to start telling you to eat good food on top of your bad food. It's not going to help. You need space in your body to clean up the garbage so you can now put in nice, nourishing food and grow your body to be a nice, healthy, strong body. It's exactly the same with karma. It's just it's mental food, that's all. So stop. Another analogy is seeds and, you know, the garden. Your life's your garden. And there's an analogy that, you know, you got the weeds and you got the flowers. She's not, a botanist will not going to, if he sees your garden overgrown with weeds, he's not going to start telling you to grow roses immediately. You've got to pull out the weeds first to make space for the roses. And that's exactly the function of this level of practice. It's so powerful and it's so logical psychologically. You know, you start not even pulling out the weeds yet, at least stop sowing more weeds. Okay, it's not quite right because we don't consciously sow weeds, but as we don't know botany, we probably are sowing weeds. So at least you stop putting more weeds in the ground. He's not telling you to grow flowers yet. Buddha's not telling you to be loving and compassionate yet. That's coming later. You got to stop being mean and ugly first and stop harming others. He's not even getting you to look at your mind directly yet. It's logical. You harness your servants of your crazy mind. And not, you know, and you don't, so by refraining, this is a crucial point like we talked last week, and I'll say it again, the power of vows. By merely not killing, you're not just merely not killing. Oh, aren't I a good girl? When you do it in the framework of living in vows, you're proactively, actively sowing very delicious, non-killing karmic seeds because it's driven by your vow not to kill. And that psychologically is very tasty. It deeply programs your mind. As I said last week, vows are like this subtle physical energy that's visible to clairvoyance. And as Lama Zopa says, and I'm sure we discussed, just being good and merely not killing is not enough, because there's just merely not killing, like even this second now, I'm not killing, but because there's no thought not to kill. And it's only when you have a thought that you sow a seed, and we talked about this, but we'll go over it in summary. Then only when I meet the ant, I will then think I must not kill it. And it's only then I pop a little good seed in my mind. But because my virtue is not so strong, because we're not all bodhisattvas yet, it's a very weak action. So by living in vows, as we talked about, 24 hours a day, you're keeping that vow. 24 hours a day, even without thinking about it. You are ticking over powerful, delicious, rich, non-killing karmic seeds and putting them into your bank vault, so that when you die, because you've programmed your mind with good ethics, then you easily, one of those virtuous seeds will be triggered, and you'll get another decent human rebirth, and you'll keep on bopping on your spiritual path. The next four are speech, which is obviously for us humans. We're the clever ones with speech. I mean, dogs and cats and lions make big noises and probably scare people. But you know, we're the clever ones with speech, aren't we? Because we've got these clever concepts in our mind. So at least we decide we will not say words that aren't true. We will not say harsh words to people. We will not just rabbit on about boring, meaningless rubbish. And that we will not say bad things behind backs. 4 actions of the speech. That if we look into our lives, I mean, I should talk about this more. We'll do this meditation. Let's just do this meditation. I don't know if we've done it, but we'll do it, called Blessing the Speech. I think I have to send you a document. Well, maybe they'll do that next week. I'll send it to you. Talia, if you remind me to send the Blessing the Speech meditation, and then we'll do it next week, okay? This is really a huge when we think about speech. You know, in our culture, we don't think about speech much. We don't think it matters. We say, oh, I can say what I like. We say that. Even legally, you know. I remember one time in Australia, one woman was found to be a complete phony. She was acting like she was a nun, a Tibetan Buddhist nun. She was giving teachings. She said she was a psychologist, but she was really mentally ill. She was a total liar. She just, every word that came out of her mouth was a serious lie. She misled many people. The same in California. I met this one fellow who had a Buddhist center just out of Los Angeles, and he invited me to come and teach. He seemed like a very lovely guy. I gave a class. He's lovely people, you know. But then as I got to know him more, I realized he was completely mentally ill. He pretended to be a monk. He didn't know what he was talking about. He said a few words that sounded like Buddhism, but he had the gift of the gab. But as we say in English, you know what gift of the gab means? You have really good speech. You've got speech that people believe. And this is very fascinating when you understand the karma. Maybe we'll go through this. The 10 results of these different negative actions is very interesting. But one of the karmic results from, you know, of speaking the truth is that in this particular, from last lives, in this life, whatever you say, even if it's lies, people will believe you. Look at Mr. Trump. He was famous. I mean, I think even the Washington Post kept track of every single Pinocchio. They called them Pinocchios. Every single lie that they had researched and found that he had spoken. Now we know, you know, half the voters in America, only about 150 million people vote, maybe 160 million this year, although the population's double. In Australia, you've got to vote. You get fined if you don't. So there's this culture. We've always used to voting. 99% of people vote. It's interesting. But in America, only half the people. So half the voters worship the ground he walks on and believes every word he says. And the other half can't stand the sight of the man and never believe a single word. So this proves the different karma he's got. One lot from lying in the past, even if he is speaking the truth now, all the people who don't like Mr. Trump think he's lying. All those who adore Mr. Trump from past life with these particular people, he's got the karma of having spoken the truth, that even now when he lies, they believe him. You've got to understand these things, and that'll explain why these things happen to us in this life. You know, this is called experiences similar to the cause, how we're seen and treated by others. One of those 4 ways that karma ripens. So my point was here, where was I? I forget where I was. Back before where I was. Oh yeah, this person, these liars. talking about the 4 non-virtues of the speech, okay? And this particular person who pretended to be a monk, and many people who loved him, he was very charismatic, people liked him, but he was mentally ill. He was just a liar. Every single thing he said, every email he sent to me, he just addicted to lying, seriously quite mentally ill. But people adored him. People listened to him. And then those who finally discovered he was a maniac, they felt so distressed because they'd put their faith in him spiritually and all these things, right? And the same with this woman. But my point is this, in our culture, you can't get arrested for lying. This woman who was lying to people in Australia and really misleading them like this monk, this other fellow did, one woman went to the police and said, can she be stopped? She's really misleading people. She's terrible. They said, no, we can't. Lying is not illegal. I mean, maybe it is if you sign a contract. But if you steal $5, you can get arrested. So it really shows how we don't value speech. And what I mean by that is we don't think, like Buddha does, that everything you say or do, and in fact think, programs you. I mean, if we understood this concept, which is karma, it's incredible. We'd have such self-respect. It's like, you know that sugar will give you diabetes. There's no way in the world people will force you to eat that sugar. But we don't have that view when it comes to the mind. This is what's so shocking, you know, because we're so addicted to believing that everybody else out there is the problem. I mean, in other words, I'm allowed to eat sugar, and then you sue the person who gives you sugar, the sugar company. It's demented. So this really takes us time, you know. It really takes us time to hear this, to take responsibility, to be owning what's going on inside us. Now, not to mention the body and speech, but incidentally, Lama Zopa said that, you know, most people on this planet have absolutely no idea that what goes on in their mind, forget the body and speech, that what goes on in their mind plays any role at all in their lives, in their happiness and suffering, in other words. Now, that really is serious mental illness, but this is what our views are. This is our neuroscientific model. This is our psychological models. Okay, more and more people these days, psychologically, are beginning to recognize that what goes on in your mind does play a role. But there's an instinct to think that as long as no one else hears me think it, I'm allowed to think what I like. I remember one time years ago, I saw in my New York Times on my iPad one story. One woman in Brooklyn got into her husband's computer and discovered that he was part of a cannibal website and that they were planning to kill and eat her. Of course, she got shocked, didn't she? And she didn't just call the police, she called the FBI, you know. It was so hilarious. Not hilarious, but hilarious. Now, this is what's hilarious. This is what's ridiculous. His lawyer, his case, his defense was, but they're allowed to think this. It's only in the mind. That doesn't mean they're going to do it. Now, that proves we think that what we do and say has got no relationship to what's in your mind. I mean, that's why we're all mad. I mean, where the hell else do your actions come from if they don't come from your mind? I mean, it seems so logical. When Buddha points it out, we're kind of embarrassed to think any other way. It's just beyond hilarious. I don't know whether he got sent to jail. Maybe he did, maybe he did. I don't remember that part. But the main point was that they're allowed to think this. We think like that in the West. We're allowed to do it, you know, because that's implying you won't get punished. You're allowed to. You're not a naughty girl. It's very weird altogether. So the verse 7, the first one is, that's the first 3 of the body. Then the speech, those 4. So now the next 3 are Buddha getting us to kind of harness our mind. But the way I like to say it, it's just like he's getting us, the last 3 of these 10 he's exhorting us to control, at least try to control the heaviest level of the 3 poisons, as he calls them, the 3 toxic emotions, I like to call. And we're going to move into that next in high school, where we get into the mind. So these 3, the heaviest level of these 3 are called attachment, anger, and then the root delusion, ignorance, ego grasping, when it's related to the self. So the grosser level of attachment is obvious when you can't control the attachment. You're out of your brain, you know. You're completely overwhelmed by attachment to food. You're completely overwhelmed by attachment to jumping on 14 boys every day. You're completely attached to stealing or lying. Any of the obvious extreme examples of intense attachment, intense craving. And you can see the nightmare of it. It's terrible. And because they lead you to do those actions. So at least harness that level of attachment, this intense craving, which is so much suffering for yourself. All these instructions in karma are not even yet discussing don't do them because they harm others. That defines them, but what Buddha's exhorting us not to do them for our own sake. And I keep repeating it. We have to hear this. When we get this properly, we get some self-respect, not guilt, not I'm bad, not all the rubbish we have, you know. The next one is at least control, the heaviest level of anger. That's obvious in the world. Malice. You can't, we all get angry, but then you let go of it. But when you can't let go of it and you imagine and want a person to suffer, why else would you then go and torture them? Because you've been thinking this for so long. This is the heaviest level of anger. Wanting the person to suffer, you know, unable to let go of it. The third one, the consequence here of very strong ignorance, ego grasping, the root delusion, the way it manifests here is said to be like what they call wrong view. It's like fundamentalism. Look at the people, you know, forget yourself for the moment, but look at other people, and very fundamentalist, very narrow-minded. It's concrete, set in stone, very stuck. This is right, that's wrong. No space, you know. People who are fundamentalist religious people, fundamentalist politicians, fundamentalist sports fans, you know. Or look in your own life. I'm right, you're wrong. No argument. That's this heavy level of ignorance, the root delusion. So you can try and control those three. So this is the 10 non-virtues. This is a broad, general set of instructions that Buddha would offer if you ask him, what can I do, Buddha, to try and become a happier person? This is his first medicine. These 10. That's it. That's his first medicine. So now obviously we're talking about if we continue this like we're discussing, and then you finally decide you'd like to take refuge in the Buddha and you formalize your commitment to the Buddha, and then you decide to take the 5 layperson's vows. Well, the 4 of those are extracted from those 10, the 3 of the body, 1 of the speech only, lying, and then 1 other one, which is called no intoxicants. So I think we discussed this last week, and we discussed vows, didn't we? Yeah, okay. All right. But we didn't discuss purification, or did we?
No, we were trying to get into it.
Okay, good. So this is where we're going now. So at the very beginning. So first of all, you're priming your mind. You've got to realize your mind's beginningless and not physical. And it's got this marvelous potential to become Buddha. When you think, well, whom can I need a person to show me the way. So Tsongkhapa puts in here this big point, extensive teachings on how you need a teacher. I just touched on that very briefly. 3, then we take our teacher's point. He starts to get us to do some market research before we even enter into the path. And he says to start thinking about this precious human rebirth. And the conclusion from that is, my action point is I don't want to waste it. Then you enter into the path. And now a teacher even gets us, his agenda continues. He wants us to increase our wake-up call, not to waste this precious life. And he gets us to understand this, you're going to die, baby. So you increase your wish not to waste this life. And then you start to think of some of the types of rebirths that you could get when you do die, and you don't know when you're going to die. It could be today. And you think, oh my God, I don't want that suffering. Of course, this takes time for us to think about. We don't think of reincarnation much. It's weird for us, you know. I don't want that suffering. No way. But I don't even want so there's 2 ways. Okay, there's 3 levels of suffering. We're going to go into the 4 Noble Truths. We're going to use it as our reference point after we've talked about purification. When we get to the second scope, high school. And in there, we talk about the first of these 4 Noble Truths, which are Buddha's take on suffering. The first is there is suffering. So this first level of suffering, he calls it the suffering of suffering. And the suffering of suffering in terms of the big picture of all the realms of existence in samsara, which I'm sure we did touch upon. Buddha's got this whole vast range of sentient beings in samsara. You've got the best suburbs, and then you've got the worst suburbs. And the worst suburbs are like the hell realms and the animals and the spirits. So that's the suffering of suffering from the point of view of the big picture. But also you can refer to the suffering of suffering in this very life itself, or in your next life. Let's say you get born a human, and when the bad things happen to you. That's also the suffering of suffering. So that maybe if we can possibly consider we could be born as a human, then we certainly know if we're going to be born a human, we don't want to be lied to. We don't want to be stolen from. We don't want to be raped, killed, poor, harmed. We know we don't want these terrible sufferings. That's the suffering of suffering. And we know, so even if we can use that as our basis, I don't want that future suffering. So whom can I turn to give me the medicine, to give me the remedies, to give me the recipes for how to live a good life so I don't have future suffering when I die? So that's how we turn to the Buddha. We take refuge, we rely upon the Buddha, his Dharma, and the Sangha, the three jewels, as they call them. Or as Rinpoche politely calls them, the three rare sublime ones. That was refuge. And then we now start to put our money where our mouth is, and now we start abiding by the doctor's instructions. Don't kill, don't steal, etc., etc. And then if we continue to go further, we can formalize that refuge, as we did before. We can formalize it first, and then we decide we'd like to take the lay vows. The first letter, the 3 levels of vows, according to 3 levels of practice in Buddhism. So the first level, and they're related to the 3. Oh, no, they're not. So then there's 3 levels of practice, and this is related to this structure of the path. So this first level of vows, as we've already talked, are the vows they call it, and this is the level of practice here. It's called the level of practice. Hang on, sorry. Okay, so there's the suffering of suffering is when the bad things happen. So this level of practice here in junior school, the lowest scope, not killing, not stealing, etc. This level of practice is to stop that kind of suffering. So that's why this very first level, if you live according to the vows of morality, you live according to the laws of morality, live in vows, and then do some purification, which we're going to go to next, you can guarantee that when you die, honey, you will get another decent human rebirth so you can keep on moving on your spiritual path. Karma is a natural law. You know, the more you know botany, the more you understand that law, the more you abide by the rules of botany, the more you can expect reasonably the garden that you grew. No one's surprised by that. You check this point. This is a very powerful point. We are so confident in our modern world about the laws of science, for example. We are so confident that you know you can design a 100-story building. You have all, and you know that you obey exactly the rules of architecture, engineering, building, every detail perfect. You can guarantee your building will come. And nobody's surprised by this. We're not shocked or fearful or panic-stricken, worrying if every day the building might fall down, because we know the laws of science. That's the clarity and the precision and the confidence that we need to cultivate if we choose to be Buddhists in the law of karma. But it's very shocking for us because we just assume it's made up by somebody. We don't have much confidence. It's not part of our culture, but this is the first level of practice, you know. Of course, it's hard to have confidence in it because we can't see the immediate proof. We can see someone else's building. We can see it works. I mean, that's why you need a teacher to look at the Buddha, because he's the end result of this law. But it's sort of, you've got a lot more, you've got to kind of have more confidence in the teaching before you get to see it directly. It's much more subtle, but it's the same logic, you know. Okay, so then control our body and speech and try to do the 10 things, and then the mind. Then we take refuge first. Then you would start to abide by the, you know, Buddha's instructions and don't kill, don't steal, don't lie. Then you commit more, and you finally take the lay vows. The first level of vows, the vows of the pratimoksha, individual liberation. This is represented by the Buddha here. That whole first set of practice, junior school and high school, which we're getting to, is the wisdom wing, is the Hinayana level, is the Theravada level of practice. And that's represented by the Buddha right in front of us here. He's the manifestation. So all the practices here are the practices of the morality of restraint. You're restraining yourself. You're refraining from harming. So the vows of individual liberation, which are the vows that enable you to achieve your own liberation, related to that level of practice, they're all, you know, like I said, they're about not harming others, not harming others, controlling your body, controlling your speech for your own sake. You are the direct beneficiary of this practice. And of course, as Lama Zopa says, all the rats and cockroaches will have a party because you leave them in peace. But the main reason you abide by the law of karma is, and this is how we say it in our culture, it's compassion for yourself. We've got to get this. If we don't get this, we don't understand suffering. We don't understand the causes of suffering, which is the second noble truth, and therefore we cannot understand compassion. So it's logical. This is why it's got to come first. So then, not only do we stop this second from killing and lying and stealing, and not only do we put atomic bombs under those habits by living in vows of not killing and lying and stealing, there's even more we can do, and that is we put atomic bombs under the seeds we've already planted 50 million lives ago up to now that haven't yet ripened as suffering. We've got to put atomic bombs under them to stop them from ripening as suffering, and that's called purification. It's so logical if we understand it like that, you know. Lama Zopa says we're insane not to do it every day. And the logic is because every millisecond that you're existing, you're dropping little karmic seeds into your bank vault. As many moments as there are in a day is as many karmic seeds you're planting. And because we're not great bodhisattvas yet and don't realize emptiness, then obviously what drives most of our actions is delusions. It's just logical. Not meant to make us scared. So let's look at purification. So there's action. Karma means action. The real action is mental action, like we talked, you know, mental action. I will, volition. So there's no karmic seed that we have planted. There's no negative karmic seed that we have planted that can't be pulled out, that can't be purified. It's just because everything's impermanent. And that's very powerful because we have this very strong view based on ego grasping that I am bad, I am no good, I cannot change, I am hopeless, I am bad. So we believe the negativity is what defines us. This is really one of the most shocking things we do to ourselves. It's so wrong, you know. So when we can understand karma and then understand how we can purify karma, it's very uplifting. It makes us confident, gives us courage, you know. Okay, so there's 4 steps in this process. Lots of 4 steps, aren't there? There's 4 steps. And I like to think of them as the 4 R's. Like my friend Gloria, one nun in Adelaide, said. Okay, the first one is, there's different order. There's different order, but I like this order. And often the lamas use the analogy of if you've eaten poison. So this is very logical. If you've eaten poison, the first step has to be the recognition. Oh my God, I can't believe it. I ate poison. How ridiculous. You're shocked. You've got to instantly recognize it. You know, instantly recognize you made a mistake. And because you know, and this is the point now, because you know the meaning of poison is you don't want future suffering. That's logical. Just like if the doctors told you not to eat sugar. The second you noticed you ate sugar, there's no way in the world you're going to, this is how we normally do, because we've got all this neurotic idea about religion. The first thing we do if we've discovered we've eaten sugar and the doctors told us not to is, oh, I ate sugar. Oh, I'm a bad person. And you sit there getting more sick and keep being guilty. Well, guilt is a useless state of mind. And it's easy to say that, but we run to it like a magnet. That's why we've got to really be our own therapists and really understand the assumptions in these deep habits we have, you know. And guilt is simply anger. But who are you angry with? Yourself. Like if I'm mad at you, I'll say, you did this and you did that and you did this. And I'll conclude, and you're a bad person. We know that very well. And I paint the whole of you with the one brush of your bad things. We know this. Well, guilt is exactly the same. I did this and I did that and I did this. And we conclude, and then I am a bad person. When we don't do this consciously, it's just completely programmed in our mind. It's tragic. It's the irony of ego, you know. So with this very first step, we've got to counteract this. We've got to counteract this. As His Holiness says, you know, when I ask somebody, I always quote this. 1,000 times I've quoted this, but it's so helpful to understand it. His Holiness says, he said that somebody asked him, what's the difference between guilt and this regret that we're describing here, which I haven't quite said properly yet. Well, as he said before, what I just said before, he says guilt, you look in the past and you go, I did this, and then you conclude, I'm a bad person. And we run to that naturally. So how do we change it? You've got to be very conscious. So he said, regret is, this first part's the same. You do, and this is the point, you've got to acknowledge you ate sugar. You can't, the one thing is we have guilt. Oh, I did eat sugar and then I'm a bad person. That's absurd. The other dumb thing we do is we'll go, oh my God, I ate sugar. Who can I sue? So you go around, keep eating sugar, but you're suing the sugar company. I mean, that's a bit demented, right? But instead, the third one we do is even more ridiculous, but this is not being ridiculous. I'm not being unkind, because sometimes because we're so fragile. This is the irony of ego. We are so fragile that we can't bear to think of the things we've done. So we live in denial. This is the most terrible pain, They're all pain. Guilt is agony. Blame is agony. And denial is terrifying. And these are the three modes we have in our lives. So we've got to unpack this. You've got to be brave to do this four opponent powers. They call them the four opponent powers. So the first one, you've got to cultivate the view. And so the first, like His Holiness said, the first part of the process is the same as if it's guilt. You say, I did eat sugar. I did kill. I did have that abortion. I did do this. I did badmouth my boyfriend. You've got to be courageous to own it. But you don't go further and then say, I'm bad. You change that and you go, His Holiness says, what can I do to fix it? But there's more in between there. So let's look at that. This attitude of regret, I've noticed with discussions for hours sometimes in teachings with people, we really find it hard to get it clear. One of the commonest ways people think of regret. Okay, what is regret again? It is, I did badmouth my boyfriend today. I did kick the dog. Think whatever. We'll go into how you do this. You say that. It's like being honest with yourself. This practice for me, I think of this practice as being my own friend. I'm trying to be honest with myself. You're talking to yourself. I did do that. Now, this is the logic. It's like the same as sugar. I did eat that sugar. And then you've got to be clear with yourself. I know I don't want the suffering that sugar will bring. I know I don't want the suffering that kicking the dog will bring, killing the baby will bring, killing my boyfriend will bring, whatever the action we do that's labeled negative, which is an action that harms another. This is the point about regret. I don't want that future suffering. It's not just compassion. That comes later. Next step is compassion. We've got to not miss this step. And it's kindness to ourselves. We can be super intelligent people. We can be really good Buddhist practitioners, but we misuse this one and use it as a big stick to beat ourselves brutally. This is our favorite activity. And don't blame yourself. We've all got it. And even as I'm saying this, until we've realized emptiness practically, the ego will run this way. These delusions are very deep, very primordial. So we need to be very humble with ourselves and know that you can't change it overnight. This is so important, So regret is, I did do that action. And then you say to yourself, Robina, I don't want the suffering to come from this. I don't want to cultivate this habit. I don't want to have that action happen to me. I don't want the environmental result, and I don't want the lower realm result. This is just it's like going to the doctor. You're being intelligent with yourself. You're being strict about your nutrition. You're being grown up about it. You're taking responsibility. It's not blame. It's not punishment. It's not shame. It's not guilt. It's practical, and it's driven by self-respect. That's when we've really got karma properly. It's driven by incredible self-respect. And if you like, by the wish, not just that, to turn yourself into this marvelous person, It's like, I always think a simple example, you're playing the piano. You're learning to be a marvelous pianist. You're so happy to identify that you played the wrong note. You're so glad, because you don't want to become a crummy pianist. You want to become a good pianist. So you quickly notice you played the wrong note. You quickly check your music on the piano and you play the right note. You're so happy. That's the purification practice. But when it comes to emotional stuff, we've got this addiction to ego grasping, addiction to I am bad. It's kind of tragic, but this is the way ego works. So we should be very kind to ourselves, very patient. very humble with ourselves, very honest. That's what this practice is, I tell you. Don't think of it as religion. You can do it with a sadhana, you can ring your bells and go blah, blah, of course you can. But then we forget the meaning sometimes. I always think of it as me being my own friend. So regret is, I did that action and and how you do this in practice, in the end of the day, you then just check the day. You check your day today. Maybe you had a lot of discussions with a lot of people. Maybe you badmouthed somebody, you were rude, you did this, you did that. And yeah, and if you killed and lied and stole as well, then fine. Regret whatever you did. And of course, like any seed that you plant, the sooner you notice you sowed it, the quicker it is to pull it out. Pretty obvious. If you don't notice you played that wrong note for 42 years, you'll be finding it quite hard to change the habit. That's why this practice is so marvelous to end the day with, so uplifting, so encouraging. Because we sow millions of seeds a day. It's like doing your weeding every day. It's just common sense. So regret is, I did do this. So in the day, the evening you'd think, depending on what happened today, you'd regret some actions you've done today that have harmed others. And then you'd think of this life. And I mean, obviously we don't remember every single thing we've done because we're not clairvoyant, but we know we've done lots of actions that have harmed others, but we've forgotten about them. That doesn't mean you didn't plant the seed. Just because, you don't remember which chocolate you ate yesterday doesn't mean it won't produce some suffering in your body in the future, because it's a natural law, you see. So then you can think of the things you've done that are kind of in this life that you remember. And I talk about this, and I'm sure I've discussed it here, I don't know, but I always regret the action of killing the fetus in my womb when I was 23. I always bring that up as an example. Because I do, so I do regret it. So this is the point now. Let's analyze the psychology of regret, because often one of the commonest things people say, and it takes a while to really discuss it to get people to be clear, what we hear regret is, I shouldn't have done it. Well, that's anger. That's your mum telling you off. You should not have done that. That's anger. So think of it very carefully. Think of it. What good is that? There's no action that can come from that. There's nothing you can do about that. It's done. We have sayings that our mums told us, don't cry over spilt milk. That sounds a bit sort of whimsical and flimsy in relation to doing heavy things like kill. But it's happened. The key thing is it's happened. But anger and guilt want to go on about it, want to focus on it. Look at people who are very angry. They can't let go, That's what guilt is. You can't let go of it. It's very fixated. All the delusions are very fixated. But so this idea of regretting, my case, my abortion, when I was 23, I'd been a Catholic. I'd given it up. I was a hippie, doing what hippies did, and I got pregnant. But I just knew I didn't want this baby. Didn't I talk about this last week? Haven't I talked about this, Talia? You'd remember. You did.
Yes.
Did good today. And I talked about it in relation to the karma between me and the baby. It's very dynamic. Yeah. Anyway, as an action, I always include that into my regretting. And so remember the logic of regret is, at the time when always using the analogy of food, because it's the one we understand. When you ate that bad food, you didn't know it would harm you. You're not foolish. You didn't realize sugar could give you diabetes. You're quite shocked to discover it. So then what regret means is, I shouldn't have eaten sugar. It's, oh my God, what a fool I was. I didn't know. I was ignorant. So you've been kind to yourself. Out of your own ignorance, out of my ignorance, I had no concept of karma, no concept of cause and effect, which of course is the philosophy I'm buying into now. So of course I'd say to myself, I regret that because I didn't know that I was harming myself. Not compassion yet. That comes next. And then you think of whatever you've done, your old rubbish habits, your old rubbish habits. You jump on too many people's boyfriends, or you steal, or whatever you do, your old habits in this life. We know ourselves well. And you regret them from the depths of your heart, because you say to yourself, Robina, you're talking to yourself, not Buddha, not yet. I'm sick of this suffering, Robina. I'm fed up, and I'm sick of the habits. But I don't want the future suffering consequences. I really do not want suffering. I am sick of suffering. You got to feel that, know that. That's the essence of karma. When we feel that, we've got the idea of karma correct. So then, of course, you can say to yourself, and I regret whatever I've done in this life and beginningless lifetimes with my body and speech that have harmed others. Because why? Again, Robina, because why, honey? Because I don't want the future suffering. And this is the real one here. We've got to regret the actions we did this life. But if we've got beginningless mind, which sort of sounds crazy to us, I know that, and all the billions of actions we must have done in those beginningless lifetimes, and we've got billions of karmic seeds, not to be overwhelmed by them. Often what happens is, and people tell me, we're overwhelmed by the thought of all those negative seeds. It overwhelms us. I understand that. But they can be pulled out. They can be purified. And this is where we understand the skill of these practices. We can understand the power of vows and the power of purification. I don't think Lama Tsongkhapa goes on about it. I don't quite think we understand the intensity of the power of these thoughts, because karma is all thoughts. Every action we did was driven by thoughts, and now these actions here are driven by thoughts. So the four opponent powers. I just started the first one. So you have confidence, you regret, of course, and the more you regret because you don't want the suffering, the more that purifies your mind. So then you think, and then of course, if you're a Buddhist, you regret your broken vows, your broken samsara since past lives as well. So then you think, well, whom can I turn to? Where's the next step? Where's the doctor? Whom can I turn to? So here, this practice I'm talking about in the context of the meditation practice that utilizes the Buddha, the Buddha from the Vajrayana called Vajrasattva. It's like the Buddhist, it's like the Vajrayana aspect of the Buddha, Vajradhara and Vajrasattva, the main Buddha in Tantra, basically. So you visualize above your crown in the Bodhisattva style, the Buddha Vajrasattva. He's holding a bell in his left hand, a dorji in his right hand. You can do it. This is a typical way they do it, all the traditions in Tibet. And of course, if you have a Lama, a spiritual teacher, you think it's their mind manifesting as Vajrasattva for your benefit. That's the whole point, You visualize it. And this is where now the second step is called reliance. So just like the sugar, whom could I turn to? You find a doctor. So this is the thing, this is called refuge. The first part is called, there's two parts in this reliance step. There's the second step, 2A and 2B. So 2A is refuge, relying upon the Buddha. So the thing is here, you can do a formal prayer, you can do all these refuge prayers, blah, blah. But the feeling I've got when I do this practice, I try to make it so real, So if I think I'm dying with poison and I find a doctor whom I can rely upon, I think I'd be blissed out, frankly. I think I'd be so happy. I'd feel like I'd won the lottery. So I'd be delighted I'd found a doctor. Well, think that way about the Buddha. I don't want suffering. Now I've chosen Buddha as my doctor to give me methods to stop me suffering. I mean, that's pretty amazing. I want to cheer. Thank you, Buddha. Give me a big hug. Not, oh, I take refuge in the Buddha, blah, 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 blah. Make it real from your heart. You're delighted. You can't believe you found this doctor. You can't believe you found a person, we're talking the Buddha here, whose methods you are applying to purify yourself. Buddha doesn't purify you. Doctor doesn't purify you. And nor does a doctor punish or reward you. But that's how we think, You rely upon the Buddha as your doctor. So you visualize above your head, you take refuge, whatever, but delighted you found that doctor. The second part is reliance also, and this is where it's curious initially, and I always mention this, but it's good to understand it. Here, now we have compassion for those we've harmed. First one is compassion for us. Now is compassion for those we've harmed. So here, why is it called reliance? Well, this is always the way the Tibetans talk. They say, at this point in the second step, we are trying to cultivate compassion. It's me trying to get compassion. So think about it. What do I need? What do I have to rely upon in order to get compassion? It's pretty obvious. Suffering sentient beings. If I never met a suffering sentient being, how could I possibly cultivate compassion? Because compassion is you have to see people suffer and go, oh my God, look at that suffering. That's unbearable. How can you have that if you never meet suffering people? So in that sense, they always talk about as relying upon, as needing. And as Geshe Sopa, one of Lama Zopa's main teachers who came to America in the 60s, and he passed away a few years ago, Sarah J. Lama, as he said, bodhisattvas need their enemies best. So the second part is compassion. And now you think of all those you've harmed, the fetus, the ants you've killed, the dogs you harmed, the boyfriends you've cheated on, whatever. And then all the trillions of beings in the past life. And now you're thinking, I have such compassion for those sentient beings whom I've harmed, and now I regret for their sake. I must purify for their sake. That's compassion. The third step, the remedy. So there's a whole cabinet of remedies in Buddhism. And in day-to-day, this one is often called the antidote, which is the real function. The antidote to a poison. You've got to apply the antidote, don't you? Well, obviously in a daily life, you'd apply the antidote. If you were lying, the antidote would be to tell the truth. If you are killed and you're regretting killing, the antidote would be to help people, to save lives, to help sick people. It's obvious. You must anyway do that. Apply the antidote to each of the things that you are regretting. But the main practice, all the Buddhas, all the Lamas in the Tibetan traditions praise hugely this third practice in the context of meditation, where you'd visualize the Buddha now, and I suppose we should do the practice at some point. We could finish today with the practice, couldn't we? Should I do that? We'll do a brief version of it. Well, you'd visualize various things and say the mantra of Vajrasattva, visualizing nectar coming and purifying you. And the fourth step is the resolve. Pabonka Rinpoche says this is the most important. Lama Zopa says the first one's the most important because it sets you going. It's true. Both of them are true. This one is so clear. You now make decisions to change. So if you've taken vows, you'll just reiterate I will never kill. I will never steal. I will never lie. And also all your bodhisattva vows and your tantric vows if you've got them. But of course, we can't keep them all perfectly. So, you'd be very specific if you like. As Lama Zopa says, you don't lie to yourself. Let's say you badmouth your boyfriend all day. You can't lie to yourself and say, I'll never badmouth my boyfriend again. You're not ready for that. Maybe you say, I won't badmouth my boyfriend for 10 minutes. You give yourself a timeline. This is a really important step. So each of these steps is so personal. It's you becoming your friend. It's you giving yourself little pep talks. It's you showing compassion to yourself. It's you wanting to change because you're sick of suffering. It's you developing compassion for others. And it's you making decisions to change. It's very powerful psychologically, We've got to hear it like that. Unpack it, like this. It's such a powerful practice psychologically. So as Lama Yeshe says, well, first as Lama Zopa says, we don't get this, this is puzzling to us. The more faith you have that you are purifying, the more you purify. And we think, faith? What are you talking about? It sounds like crossing your fingers. But think of the meaning of faith, confide, with trust. Because I know in other languages like Italian and Plato, that word's more related. We say confidence. When we in English say confidence, it doesn't sound like faith. Confidence means intelligent. You're confident. So the more confidence you have when you think of the regret, when you think of the reliance and the compassion, when you think of the remedy, when you think of resolve, the more you think them confidently, that is what purifies you. Your mind is what purifies you. But you see, this is the interesting point. Because we have this root delusion, ego grasping, this marimpa, this ignorance, that when it clings to this self-existent me, we can call it ego grasping, because that's so deep inside us, this concreteness of a bad, separate, bereft me-ness. We don't believe. What do you mean if I just regret? How can that change? I'm still a bad person. This is hard. This is what's so heartbreaking, because we believe that I'm a bad me. And so it's hard. I mean, this is so common for us. I mean, there's a friend of mine, the person I know, I've talked to for years and years. I've known him since a little boy. We talk a lot. And he's been to Buddhist courses, he's been to Kopan with me, he's been to the pilgrimage with me. I've known him for many years. And he's still, it's like his mind, you can see the suffering. His mind is absolutely fixed in what he believes now. And I said, and even just in a recent discussion, can you see that it's possible to actually think a different thought? And he admitted, he said, it's incredible, I just can't see it. I don't know how to do it, he said. We think that's laughable, but that's how we all are. We are addicted to the deluded stories. We are addicted to the guilty story, the angry story, the self-hating story, the jealous story. Don't beat yourself up for this. We should be weeping in tears for ourselves. This is the tragedy of the concreteness of the delusions. They are set in stone, they're deeply habitual, and we are addicted to believing those stories. This is the point. That's why emptiness should shake. Emptiness is the most powerful. That's why emptiness is the final purification. When we finally realize that nothing is set in stone, that nothing has an intrinsic nature. It can't be that way. That's what it puts atomic bombs under the delusions and the negative karmic seeds, you know. So it's like you have to be humble. The irony of ego is we're very arrogant. It sounds so peculiar to say that you're arrogant if you hate yourself, but listen to this, and we should be embarrassed by this. If we've got low self-esteem, if we've got dissatisfaction, I'm never enough, what I do is not enough, which is just another way of putting self-hate. I am not enough. I can't do enough. I don't have enough. I don't do enough. I'm not good enough. That's low self-esteem. And it's the flip side of arrogance. And if we didn't have arrogance, we could not have low self-esteem and dissatisfaction, I tell you. I mean, dissatisfaction and low self-esteem is slightly different. They're all quite precise. But the one of dissatisfaction, which is coming from practicing attachment in the past, because you just never have enough. No matter what you get, it's not enough. No matter what you do, it's not enough. No matter how good you are, not enough. No matter how much you try, not enough. No matter how much you purify, not enough. It's an addiction. We have it, and we all have it. So we need to be very humble with ourselves and dare to not believe these concrete stories. And that's the power of purification. So as Lama says, the power of purification is the power of regret, the power of reliance, the power of the remedy, and the power of resolve. Now, again, we know this in daily life. If you half-heartedly think, oh, I think I'd like a chocolate, but then, you know, that's about all you say. Well, you won't get a chocolate, I promise. But the more you say, I want a chocolate, then you will go get a chocolate and nothing will stop you from getting a chocolate. That's the power of your mind, baby. Well, you use the same power to purify your silly rubbish, you know, and become this marvelous person that we all actually are, but we just haven't seen it, you know. It's having confidence in our own mind, in our own thoughts. It doesn't mean like being like living in la-la land. It's not like that. It's having confidence in the power of thoughts, which is confidence in the power of karma, the law of cause and effect. You know? So I think you need to ask me some questions.
If there are any questions, oh, I see that Rai raised the hand. Rai, you're up. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, sure. Hi, I'm Ray.
And sorry for mispronouncing your name, by the way.
So what I've been sitting with is like, does everything that comes through become a seed? Doesn't it seem like going back to the piano example, could some things that come in just be like these notes that you play that pass through the system without actually coalescing into a seed? Like, especially like I find like lately, when I'm sitting, like stuff comes up and just kind of moves through like a ha-ha, you know, and like then it's kind of just moves through like an
You're talking about thoughts, Ray.
Thoughts and like you talked last week, I think about prana, like when something just like kind of moves through your body.
Okay, this is the Vajrayana model, and yeah, all the mind is linked to the winds. But the Buddhist you would be, if you're an ordinary being, as many moments in the day is as many moments of thoughts that you have. Some are very tiny. Yeah, they move through you, but they're still there. They're still a thought. You can't avoid that. There are trillions of thoughts a day. So obviously the character of the thought, whether it's negative or positive, whether it's strong or weak, is the character of the imprint it leaves in the mind and the character of the fruit it will bring. But every millisecond, yeah, there are lots of thoughts, but they're not very strong thoughts, but they're still thoughts. That's the character of how we are in the way the Buddhist describes, the Buddhist model of the mind describes. We live at the level of conceptuality. Even when we're tiny babies and we can't articulate things, you know, there's still anger and attachment there. There's still feelings there, but we can't articulate. You can see it by the baby's response. If you hurt the baby will scream. You know, some other babies don't scream. That's because there's anger in their mind, but they can't articulate it yet, but it's still there. So
But what about the energy before the response?
What do you mean by the energy before the response? I don't understand that one.
Like, so if the impulse is coming through your body and you've not yet reacted with your mind and called it anger, labeled it anger.
No, that doesn't make it anger. Like I said, a baby who can't articulate anything, due to karma, they're born with a tendency to be angry. So even when they're tiny baby and their mother hurts them, that anger is in their mind. Just because they can't say it doesn't mean it's not anger, because it's a habit they brought with them. So these you see, these impulses, they're still called conceptual thoughts, which is a bit of a surprise to us because we think of conceptual thoughts as being very rational. No, they're deeply, primordially, deeply, instinctively programmed within us. We come into this life programmed from the first second of conception with all these habits from having thought them and done them and said them before. Conceptual thought goes to much subtler levels than we would think in our model of the mind, Ray. Do you understand my point here? Good. Thank you so much. Thank you. Who else?
Fabio, please unmute yourself. And then Wendy will be next.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Go.
Venerable Robina, yes, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. First one is, can you elaborate a little bit more on what we can proactively do on a daily basis to increase the store of our good karmic seeds? Now, you talked about the vows, but I wanted to know what we can practically do other than reaffirming these vows and not killing, not doing this, not doing that, to actually, generate these positive karmic seeds.
Vows, but no, vows is the answer. That's the point, Fabio. Vows are said to be tremendously powerful because every second of the day you're keeping those vows. Just that is so powerful, and not only that. Okay, the difference between merely being a nice person and not killing when you meet the ant or the cockroach. You're a nice person and you don't lie, you don't steal, you don't kill because you're not meeting those objects and because they are your habits from the past. That's pretty good. Mm-hmm. But they're not very powerful because the positive, because the virtuous thought that impels you to be this way is not very, it's not very prevalent. You're just walking around being a nice person because not many bad things are happening to you. You're not being triggered to do bad things. So that's not enough. You can't, that's just being good is not enough virtue. So then Lama Zopa says the power of a vow is such that you keep it 24 hours a day. It's so potent that not only is it you're dropping positive seeds into your positive bank vault 24 hours a day, which is what you need. You need lots of seeds, and it puts atomic bombs under those habits. And then you add purification to that, and that's even more powerful. So these are the two main things, living in vows and purifying, that you can't surpass at this first level of practice. So of course, the next level of practice is you start to you start to do more practice, like you visualize the Buddha, you say mantras, you be beneficial to others, you go to take the bodhisattva vows, and you keep moving along the path. We're talking about this level of practice. Super, super powerful. You
affirm these vows in the morning, for example, as a how do you do it? You kind of reaffirm the vows in your head.
That question. I want to know if you've understood what I said first. I haven't mentioned about reaffirming yet. What have you understood? It's a good point. I'm really glad you're bringing it up. So what have you understood?
No, because I mean it's the difference. I'm trying to understand the difference between, as you said, the difference between just being a good person and not actually doing these things, but really kind of proactively, generates good seeds as part of a proactive way of doing it. I'm not clear about the difference.
That's what the power of vows is, Fabio. This is the point. So do you want me to say it again? Well, what have you understood about the power of vows? How have you understood? I'm so glad you're asking this. So tell me what you think you've understood from what I said just before. The
way I kind of saw this, it's almost like an affirmation in your mind on a daily basis.
What?
Of saying an affirmation in your mind.
I didn't say that. So tell me what you think I mean when I say the power of vows. What did you think I meant by it? What is power?
I'm not gonna kill. Yeah, my understanding is I'm not gonna kill. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna do that. In terms of vows.
But I said about what the power of vows was. What was so powerful about vows? Why is that powerful? How does that benefit you? Don't you remember me saying something? And if you didn't, I'm glad, because I'll say it again.
I think I would, yeah, I think it would be great if you...
I mean, this is so good, because I say these words because I think people understand me, but obviously not, because we don't think like this. Now listen to me, listen. Okay, this is, again, I'll say the words. There you are, Fabio, this nice man who's born into this life. Obviously, he's got some connection with the spiritual path, because here he is again, you know, listening to Buddha's teachings. So that means you've been good in the past. It means you've probably lived in vows in the past, Fabio. This is a really good point. Okay, good. Let me ask you a question. This is more to say. Have you, since a little boy, have you been fairly ethical?
Not always.
No, but get my point. Was your tendency to want to rape, terrorize, steal, lie, kill, and then you had to turn yourself around? Or do you just sort of have a general tendency to not be a bad person? I don't have to get you to confess bad things. Get my point. Some people come into this life with a strong tendency to kill. You can see it by their behavior.
Yeah.
Have you been that way?
No.
Good. So that means that means, honey, God damn it, Fabio, not God damn, I'm so happy for you. This is good, good, good. The point is this. That means you have lived in vows in the past. That means because you programmed your mind in the past by living in vows to not kill, not steal, not lie, 24 hours a day, even when you weren't conscious of it. Because the power of vows is such. And then one of the consequences of living in vows is you get born in this life, one, as a human being, and two, with no tendency to kill and lie and steal. It's like a miracle, Fabio. Look at the world and people who lie and steal and kill. They can't help themselves because they haven't lived in vows of ethics in the past. So that's the key benefit, which I didn't properly mention, of you now taking your vows again. And again, I'll repeat it this way. Now I'll repeat this way. The past life, you've lived in vows. You come into this life, you're now a good person. You don't kill, you don't steal, you don't lie. We've agreed on that. But listen to this, Fabio. When we understand the creating of karma, you've got to have a thought first. There's no karma created by just merely not doing something, because your mind's not involved. If there's no ant in front of you now, you're not having the thought, I must not kill, are you?
That's right.
So the only time you will create the very proactive, positive action of not killing is when you have the thought, oh, there's an ant, I must not kill. That's the only time you will have the thought, I will not kill. And that is when you drop a nice little non-killing seed in your bank vault of non-killing seeds. Are you with me?
Yeah.
But until the next time you meet the cockroach or an ant, you won't have that thought again. So then you're not creating any virtuous karma of non-killing. So Fabio, just to get another decent human rebirth after you die, you have to have bucket loads of delicious, rich, strong karmic seeds of non-killing in your bank vault. But if you hardly ever think it in a day, you don't have any seeds by the time you've ended up your life. So you've used up all your past karma of being a nice person by having a nice life now and not need to kill, but you're not creating any more non-killing karmic seeds, and you need bucket loads of them. So, as Lama Zopa says, as the Buddha says, that's why he loves his vows, by you deciding one day to kneel in front of somebody and become a formal Buddhist and take the vow of non-killing, non-stealing, non-lying. From that second, they say in the text that vow is so powerful somehow that it's like a subtle physical energy that, now I've lost you. I can't see you moved on there's no stability on these ridiculous computers. Now I've lost you.
I'm here.
You're on page 2 now. All of a sudden you went to page 2. Maybe I was shouting too loud. You had to move away.
You put me on page 2.
There you go. So now, Fabio, the second you've got a vow, the vows are so powerful psychologically, the Buddha's teachings say, that it's in your mind stream all the time. And so then every second you're not killing, as opposed to before, when you never thought of not killing, you only created the karma of non-killing when you thought of it. But now, because of a vow, 24 hours a day, you're keeping that vow, even without thinking about it. You are dropping karmic seeds of non-killing into your bank vault.
Okay.
Now do you hear me?
Yeah, I get it. Thank you.
Then the next point is because just being good, as Lama Zopa says, is not enough. So I'll use the example of, one always uses example of two little kids. One, they're both human. Okay, so they both had the first karma of non-killing from the past life. They've got a human body. 2, the second way karma ripens is our tendencies. And this is the key point about the benefit of vows. This one little boy, he's 3 years old. He's the son of a Buddhist friend of mine, and he's now about 40. But she told me when he's a little boy, she was just simply taking the lice out of his head, and he was crying with compassion for the lice. Mummy, mummy, don't hurt them. Leave them alone. It's their home. She didn't have time to teach him this. So this is coming from his strong tendency in the past not to kill, from having lived in vows, not only that, but even compassion. And so he's never had a single thought to kill anything. And that's just because he's just a nice kid. It's not just because he's nice randomly. That's the power of vows, Fabio. You bring it with you. In this life, like you have no tendency to kill. But don't just rest on your laurels and let it run out, because next life you won't have the same tendency. You've got to keep putting more petrol in the tank by living in vows of non-killing again. And it has this powerful psychological approach that 24 hours a day it's in your mind. You're creating virtuous karma and purifying the tendency to kill. It's got also that function as well, the vows. And then on top of that, at the end of every day, you do your purification practice. And you regret your killing and stealing and lying, and you vow never to do again. So you keep increasing it. So these two practices, you cannot get a better practice. You can watch your breath for 5 hours every day and be very mindful. It's like zero virtuous karma in comparison with powerfully living in the vows of non-virtue and purifying your mind. That is very skillful practices with which you can really get ahead of the game. Are we communicating now?
Yeah, perfectly. Could I ask you something else very quickly?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
I just brought another story. Sorry, stop. The other story was another little boy. The other one I mentioned, he also had a human body, a nice person, good tendencies, but he had a tendency to kill. So the second he met fishing at the age of 3, he fell in love with fishing. And no matter how much he heard about how fish suffer, he couldn't see it because he didn't have a vow for not killing. Because you just come into this life with a tendency to kill. And honey, look at the world. Most humans will kill naturally because they haven't had the vow of not killing from the past. It's a rare human to find who wakes up in this life with no thought to kill. And that's a person, the Buddhist view is because they've programmed their mind with this powerful tendency to not kill. That literally you bring the habit with you. That's the power. That's the marvelous thing. And we need that badly, you know. Do you understand, Fabio? So what's your other question going?
I wanted to ask you about one of the questions that sort of came into my mind is when I speak to friends about, not about Buddhism in general, but one of the things that comes up is from a lot of people that, you know, perhaps are not practicing or maybe haven't come across Buddhism, is this whole idea of, I find it very difficult to believe something that I can't see.
Right,
that's what they tell me.
That's right.
So I was just wondering, do you think this is one of the reasons why human beings find it hard to understand when we talk about the actions of the mind, our intentions, our actions that happen in our mind, because they can't be seen?
I understand your point.
Such.
Don't know. It's exactly true. It's exactly the same. You know, it's true. And in fact, if we start to analyze our ordinary views day to day, we mostly believe in things. We don't actually know the proof at all. I mean, for example, I just want to say this point. We say in the world, if we're materialists, oh, well, you know, Einstein, E = mc squared is true. It's been proven. Well, I'm sure Einstein has proven it. But the point is, to be very accurate, it's mere belief for me until I've proven it. But we tend to be arrogant in the West and say, because one person's proved it, therefore it's science. But we think it's therefore science for me. That's a mistake. So that's just one point. The other point is this. Of course it's true. We're not clairvoyant, Fabio. Buddha's view goes into many future lives. Of course it's difficult, but that's not a logical reason not to take something as your hypothesis. If I've never heard of math in my whole life, never heard of such a thing as mathematics, and then I hear Einstein say E = mc squared, you know, I can't just go. I know that Einstein has not asked me to believe it, but I can't see the truth of it right now, can I? Because you haven't studied math. Would you agree with that? You can't see the proof of it. Yep. So what are you going to do with that? So we think because it's religion, you can't prove it. So we think there are two options: reject it or swallow it whole. But we know with Einstein, he's presenting his findings and he says, well, Robina, if you want to realize that E = mc squared, honey, just follow the steps that I've taken. It's not complicated. It might take you a few years. So you've got the method. Well, that's the Buddha. We don't think of it like that. So but we think of religion as you have to believe or not believe, but that's just idiocy. You've got methods there. So Buddha says, I have found it to be true that mind is not physical. I have found it to be true the law of karma is what runs the universe. I have found it to be true, blah, 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 blah. So just like Einstein. Just like Einstein, but you don't just believe or not believe, which is what we think we should do. No, you decide you want to be like Buddha, so you follow the same steps that Buddha did. And then you've got to start somewhere. You've got to start with 1 + 1 is 2. And then you'll eventually prove that 1 + 1 is 2. You've got to get some confidence in Einstein. Now you go to next 2nd grade, 3rd grade. You go incrementally. You don't suddenly have a magic realization overnight about E = mc². The same with emptiness and reincarnation and karma. It's all there in the gradual path to enlightenment, all laid out in the proper steps. And you go 1 step at a time and you tick the boxes as you go. And then as the Dalai Lama says, if you actually go along and you prove at some point that Buddha is wrong here, of course you reject him. Mm-hmm. That's the proper approach to being a Buddhist, Fabio. Same as Einstein. And therefore, because most of those people you talk about, because they can't see E = mc², it's like, I know you're saying reincarnation, it's the same thing. They say that you can't see it, so I can't. But you got to learn it. Nothing comes like a vision. You got to learn math and algebra and all these things to be able to understand it. And it's either understandable by you or it's not. That's the whole point. But we're so addicted to believing that there's religion. You believe it or you don't. That's just superstition. That's intellectual laziness, Fabio. You take it as your working hypothesis and you work on it step by baby step by baby step. So be humble and relaxed each step of the way. And all I can say is in my life, I haven't realized that much. So far, so good. I'm content, you know. Mm-hmm. You understand?
Yep. Thank you.
Good, Fabio. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What else, people?
Wendy's next.
Good, Wendy. Hi, darling.
Hi, Robina. Quick question. Is there a practice that, like, is there a practice in some faiths or whatever, there's a practice you can actually do in the moment when you catch yourself, right? Like you catch yourself bad mouthing, right?
Of course.
Is there a practice in good?
Yeah, the practice is like, well, okay, I'm always asking, I'm using these dumb examples always, but they're so helpful. When you catch yourself playing that wrong note on the piano, what's the practice? What do you do? I mean, it's a literal question, and the answer will tell you the answer you need. What do you do at that second? Yeah. You see it, you got to recognize it's the wrong note. You don't go, oh, Bach gave me the wrong note, it's his fault. You go, I played the wrong note. And then you look at the music and you counteract it by playing the right note. So if you catch yourself bad mouthing, your awareness, your wisdom catches it. And you go, oh, listen to that, Wendy, shut your mouth, baby. You do the opposite, you apply the antidote. I mean, that's as simple as that. Of course, it's way more complicated because we have 1,000 thoughts a second, but this is all we can do every second. It's like if you catch yourself going into the wrong lane on the freeway, you better bloody get back on the right lane pretty quick, smart girl. You change it. You simply fix it. That's really what being your own therapist means. And you get ever better and ever better and ever better at seeing our thoughts and then catching ourselves and then arguing with ourselves, adjusting. Like we do playing piano, like you do making a cake, like you do doing anything. It's the same here. Exactly the same, darling. And that's the actual job day to day. We're going to get into that's the middle scope. We're going to get there. But this is where the purification practices and living in vows and abiding by the laws of karma, these are like priming your mind to enable you to have the space to notice your thought when it arises. Do you understand that point? That's how it's said to be. You get the point now. They help your mind get ready to do the actual practice. So when we get to the next week, when we get to this next scope in this series of stages of the path, all these practices now are almost all merely like preliminary practices. They're priming our mind to now get to the actual job of doing what Wendy's talking about, being your own therapist second by second by second, catching the thoughts and then adjusting yourself. And this eventually, Wendy, comes when you don't just wait till you want to kill your boyfriend before you adjust yourself. That's where if you start to do some practice and you do some purification, you live in vows and all this other business, then you're priming your mind ready so you'll be able to catch the angry thoughts before they get to the surface. And that's when you can adjust them before you go crazy. That's the real skill we have to learn. Then we can navigate life beautifully. You with me, Wendy?
Thank you.
Good, darling. Thank you so much. Well, it's too late for meditation now. Never mind. The whole day is a meditation. What else? Other questions?
Yes. Aline, sorry if I can't pronounce your name correctly again. Please unmute yourself.
It's right, Shalini. Hi, Robina.
Who's there? Who's talking to me?
Me.
Aline, good darling, talk to me.
Last time we talked about bad karma when it's ripening, and then you mentioned something that I also read on Lama Yeshe's website when in his letters, that he says to rejoice, to have a different perspective. But I'm having a little bit of difficulty with this dualistic mind.
Well, you've got to give me a better example than that. It just sounds way. I don't understand it at all. So you have to explain to me.
So when things are happening in your life consecutively, and you're stuck in a bad route, for example, and then you said something that I should be happy that bad karma is right.
Oh, okay, darling. Okay, now I understand your point.
Could you
Okay.
explain a little bit more?
We'll explain better, yeah.
Thank you.
So if you're sitting in front of the television, you've got no muscle tone, and you're overweight, and you're lazy, and you're watching the television, and you're feeling a big pain in your body. That's not a cool thing. That's not good. You don't want to get sick. You don't want to have pain. Do you agree with that? That pain is not a good sign, is it?
Yeah.
You agree? Okay. Now you decide to go to the gym. And the first day you go to the gym, and the first day you come home, I think you'll have 10 times more pain. Would you agree with that? But that pain is a good sign. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yes.
Why?
Because it's making effect, it's having an effect.
You're working on because you're working on your body. So as soon as you start working on your mind, honey child, it's the same thing. The dirt has to come out. The dirt has to come out. I always quote that story of a friend of mine, a serious monk meditator, 30, he's done years and years and years of 3-year, 4-year retreats. And at some point out of his brain with rage and despair and anger, I mean, he was really quite distressed and went to Lama Zopa, and Rinpoche laughed and laughed and laughed and said, fantastic. The dirt has to come out. Now, this is scary to hear, but in exactly the same way, you wouldn't rush off to the doctor after the first day at the gym and freak out about the pain in your muscles. She will just tell you, but this is normal. It's a good sign. You're moving your muscles, baby. So kind of like the dirt's coming out. It's exactly the same, but we've got to be very much more skillful. So then, okay, we don't just misunderstand this. So if you're working on your mind, if you're doing some practice every day and you are driven by your wish to become a better person, which is an incredible motivation. So then when it's almost like it does trigger your own delusions, which have always been there before, but first of all, you notice them more now. So that's even one of the signs. You notice your mind more. So naturally you think, oh my God, I'm getting worse. Of course you're not getting worse. But this is the other point. Another point is this, and we've got to really be conscious of this. People say, oh no, so much anger comes into my mind. I'm scared of it. I'm creating so much negative karma. No. So it's like this. Let's say you're my friend. And let's say I'm mad at my boyfriend. And I come to you and I'm consciously being angry. And I'm buying into that angry story. I blame him. He's evil. He does this. He does that. So that's called being angry. That's called increasing my anger. There's no good about that. Can you hear me so far? Now, if I go to you as my friend and I'm trying to work on my mind and I come and I'm in tears, I'm getting so angry with my boyfriend, Aline, I don't know what to do. I really don't want to be angry. And there's so much anger coming, but I'm doing my best to work on it. That's not being angry. That's called practicing Dharma. So we shouldn't be scared of our mind. Anger and junk are rising if you don't buy into it. That's a very good sign. That's the dirt coming out, because that anger's always been there and now it's rising to the surface. It's like the dirt in the washing machine. The water looked all very clean until you put your dirty shirt in, and now the water looks filthy. You don't freak out. You're so delighted. The dirt's coming out. We've got to understand this difference. It's so, so important. But our tragedy is because we're so scared of our own emotions. We're so scared of our own anger. As soon as we see a sign of it, we have a panic attack. We want to make it all go. And then we think I'm a bad person and we freak out and can't handle it. So that's why you have to have courage to see our minds and distinguish what is there and then not to buy into the story. This is the most powerful practice. And this is the hardest one. Are we communicating, people?
Yes, thank you.
Good, I'm very glad. This takes courage, honey, I promise. And this is why we have to be conscious as much as we can every moment to know how to interpret what's there and not be, that's why I like to call them my roommates. You have to learn to, and I'm not joking, you have to learn to make friends with your crazy roommates. Make friends with your attachment and your anger and your guilt and your jealousy. They've been there a long time, but we just want to make them all go away and think we're like being a good little girl. We're terrified of them. Don't be scared of them. Confront them. Hear what they're saying. And the second you do this, you're already dissipating them. It's so powerful, but it needs courage and kind of intelligence to know how to interpret what goes on, you know. I hope we're communicating, people. That'll do today. Enough. All right. Talia, okay?
So we conclude?
Yeah, don't put the prayers there. I just want to say the words in English and we think the thoughts. It's much more, I like that sometimes. So just think, okay, honeys? Just think. We've been here nearly 2 hours, a bit less. I cheated your time today. As many moments as there have been, as many thoughts, tiny, strong, big, whatever. And they're all programmed in the mind. None of them go astray. It's very powerful. So even though we don't remember 99% of what we've thought today, but it's been marvelous, me too included. I've been listening as well. So all these positive thoughts we've planted, we think I'm going to nourish these thoughts with my virtue, my efforts, my practice from this second. Why? So that these seeds will grow in the future. These thoughts, which become seeds, will grow in the future as my marvelous potential as we motivated. So as a Buddha, so I can be of benefit to others. I'll be delighted. This 2 hours has been really 2 hard hours of practice, And so we just keep moving, never giving up. And then we think, may compassion, bodhicitta, this amazing aspiration to be of benefit to others, may it grow and grow and grow and grow in the hearts of all. And may we never give up on ourselves and on others. Changchub sem chogren poche ma ke panam ke gyuchi ke panyam pa me payang gong ne gong du pelva sho. Thank you, precious ones. So much, darling. So much, everybody.
Before we conclude, Venerable, could we please recite the long life prayer for you?
Okay, then yes, that's good. Thank you so much. That's good for everybody. We think everybody. That's good. Good aspirations in those prayers. That's right. Okay, go.
A prayer for the long life of Venerable Robina Courtin, who is fully dedicated. And everybody, if you like, unmute yourself. Feel free. Who is fully dedicated, compassionate, devoted, and wise, dynamic female teacher of the FPG and reign of
distinguishing the capacities of the 3 times in direction Dharmakaya, the great bliss, embraced by great compassion, my perfect Aryatarya, who in ordinary form are the great for us,
my perfect
never guidance. How kind you are.
May
All your wishes be fulfilled and
life be stable in
Almighty One, you have destroyed all the enemy of delusion,
for
who revealed the Dharma of scripture and realization, spreading in the mental continuum of transmigrating beings, thereby eliminating separation in the image. How kind you are. May
destroy the animal in the Dharma of scripture and realization.
May the blessing of the Guru, the deity, and the Dhamma protect you and be trying action and day, as well as good
as well as the
I only never this, please even once again, and may all the vital points of praying be
fulfilled. My prayers be fulfilled.
Thank you all. Thank you, darlings, all of you. May we all live long. The world needs good people badly. So live long. Okay. You can punch death. Okay.
Thank you, Venerable.
But living in virtue, living in morality, living in vows, you purify the negative karma. You purify your killing karma, which is the cause of dying young. So then you can put more petrol in your life tank. It's possible. Okay. Keep moving, babies. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Thank you.